Good afternoon and welcome to October 2018. This broadcast is brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. This afternoon, there are a number of questions which will be asked by some members, and these questions are directed to the respective cabinet secretaries. And among those questions include one by the Member of Parliament, Luanda constituency, Honorable Christopher Mulele. Will ask the Cabinet Secretary for Education to provide a list of all duly registered government-funded technical and vocational education training institutions in the country, indicating their location in terms of counties and constituencies, and when will funds allocated to TVET institutions in Luanda constituency during the financial year 2018-2019 be disbursed. That particular reply will be made available before the Departmental Committee on Education and Research. The member for Bomachoge Borabu constituency, Honorable Zadok Ogutu, will ask the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture and Livestock to provide existing policy guidelines regarding buying of tea leaves from farmers by tea factories, and in particular by the Mara Tea Factory located at the border of Kisii and Narok counties. He will also be seeking to know the steps the ministry is taking to ensure that the numerous challenges faced by tea farmers are addressed. The reply to those particular questions will be made available before the Departmental Committee on Agriculture and Livestock. The nominated Member of Parliament, Honorable Godfrey Otsotsi, will ask the Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development but when the ongoing construction of Kisumu-Kakamega Webuye Road expected to be complete, and also is the Cabinet Secretary aware that the said road has numerous design gaps, including huge open drainages, lack of footbridges and pedestrian walkways, which leads to numerous accidents and loss of life? And also, would the ministry consider compensating victims of road accidents that result from poor road design? The response to those particular questions will be made available before the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing. The member for Kibwezi West, Honorable Dr. Patrick Musimba, will ask the Cabinet Secretary for Education, and these are the questions. Is the Cabinet Secretary aware that
let's proceed.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions.
Member for Kadian.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a petition regarding funding of co-curricular activities in our schools. I, the undersigned, on behalf of the primary school parents, draw the attention of the House to the following. One, that Article 43(1), Part F of the Constitution of Kenya, read together with Section 28 of the Basic Education Act 2013, entitles every Kenyan child to free and compulsory basic education and obligates the state and parents to facilitate access to quality basic education. Two, that co-curricular activities are an integral part of the education process that not only ensures that the education process produces all-rounded persons, but also serves as an income earner to learners who pursue co-curricular related careers. Three, that Section 54(7) Part R of the Basic Education Act further recognizes the importance of co-curricular activities by obligating the County Director of Education to manage it alongside other sports education, talent development, among others in counties. Four, that in furtherance of government's policy to provide free basic education, the Ministry of Education banned charging extra levies in primary schools and provided under capitation of Kenya shillings 76 per pupil to fund co-curricular activities via a circular dated 7th of February 2017. Five, that the said capitation of 76 shillings per pupil is given to the schools and they have been instructed to share it at various levels of utility as indicated hereunder. Part 1 of that is school level, 46 shillings per pupil. Part 2 of the same, sub-county level, 15 shillings per pupil. Part 3 of the same, county level, 10 shillings per pupil. And Part 4, the regional level, 5 shillings per pupil.
Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to support this very important petition. Mr. Speaker, it is true that parents and the students are being charged an extra fee across all primary schools in Kenya, while education is supposed to be free in this country, Mr. Speaker. And it has gone to an extent where children are even sent away from school so that
report of the Auditor General on the World Trade Organization WTO projects and pending bills at Kenyatta International Conference Center. 3, performance audit report on the implementation of the National School Upgrading Program by the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology. Number 4, performance audit on the effectiveness of measures put in place by Kenya Wildlife Service in protecting wildlife by the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife. And 5, special audit report of the Auditor General on the procurement and implementation of the Mombasa-Nairobi pipeline, in bracket line 5. Number 6, the report of the Auditor General on the financial statements in respect of the following institutions for the year that ended 30th June 2017 and the certificate therein. A, Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. B, Lake Victoria South Water Service Board. C, Alupe University College. D, Marine and Fisheries Research Institute. And E, Coast Development Authority. Number 7, and finally, Mr. Speaker, the reports of the Auditor General and financial statements in respect of the following constituencies for the year that ended 30th June 2017 and the certificate therein. A, Sirisia constituency, Lugari constituency, Bumula constituency, and finally D, Kapuchai constituency.
The Chairperson, Select Committee on Cohesion and Equal Opportunity. I'm informed the Chairperson is absent and he has requested that the member for Bomachoge Borabu, the Honorable Professor Ogutu, to lay the report.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. On behalf of the Chairperson, Committee on National Cohesion and Equal Opportunities, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Tuesday, October 23rd, 2018. Reports on the Select Committee on Cohesion and Equal Opportunity on the following activities. Number 1, a report on the benchmarking visit to Kigali, Rwanda on 5th to 9th March 2018. Number 2, a report on the 27th session of the Human Rights Council held in the United Nations headquarters, Geneva, Switzerland, on 5th to 9th March 2018. And finally, a report on the Global Peace Foundation training and reform held in Belfast, Northern Ireland, on 6th to 8th March 2018. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Lands.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Tuesday, October 23rd, 2018. Report of the Departmental Committee on Lands on its consideration of a petition by the Honorable Joseph Manje, MP, on behalf of the residents of Kajiado North constituency regarding alleged discrepancy in compensation offered to landowners by the National Land Commission. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Professor Ogutu.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to give notice of the following motion, that this House notes the report on the Select Committee on National Cohesion and Equal Opportunity on the Global Peace Foundation Training and Forum held in Belfast, Northern Ireland, on 6th to 8th March 2018, laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, October 23rd, 2018. Next, Mr. Speaker, I also beg to give notice of the following motion, that this House notes the report of the Select Committee on the National Cohesion and Equal Opportunity on the 37th session of the Human Rights Council, held at the headquarters, the UN headquarters, Geneva, Switzerland, on 59th March 2018, laid on the table of this House on Tuesday, October 23rd, 2018. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the following motion, that this House notes the report of the Select Committee on National Cohesion and Equal Opportunity on the benchmarking visit to Kigali, Rwanda, on 5th to 9th March 2018, laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, October 23rd, 2018. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next order.
Order number 7, questions and statements.
First question by the member for Luanda constituency, Honorable Omulele.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I stand to raise the question to number 80 of 2018, which is that could the Cabinet Secretary for Education provide a list of all duly registered government-funded technical and vocational education training TVET institutions in the country, indicating their location in terms of counties and constituencies? And B, when will funds allocated to TVET institutions in Rwanda constituency during the financial year 2018-2019 be disbursed? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Well, question referred to the Departmental Committee on Education and Research to prioritize for appearance of the Cabinet Secretary to answer the question. Next question is by the member for Bomachoge Borabu constituency, Professor Ogutu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question goes to CS for
Works and Housing to similarly prioritize for appearance of the Cabinet Secretary to respond to the question. Next question, member for Kibwezi West, Honorable Musimba.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise to ask question 087 of 2018, direct to the Cabinet Secretary for Education. The first question being, is the Cabinet Secretary aware that students in some accredited technical vocational education and training institutions cannot access the higher education loans? And B, could the ministry consider reviewing the policy with a view to ensuring that the students in all accredited institutions have access to the said loans? I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Found the Cabinet Departmental Committee on Education and Research, likewise prioritize. Finally, the question by the member for Isiolo County, Honorable Rehema Dida Jaldesa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to ask this question. My question goes to the Cabinet Secretary for Interior and Coordination of National Government. Question A, what is the implementation status of the report by the committee constituted by the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government to look into matters relating to the boundary dispute between Isiolo and Meru counties? Question B, what measures has the ministry put in place to ensure that there is lasting peaceful coexistence between the residents of Isiolo and Meru County? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Committee on Administration and National Security to prioritize. Next aspect of that order is statement by the member for Kieni, Honorable Kanini Kega.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 44-2C, I wish to request for a statement from the chairperson of Departmental Committee on Education and Research regarding the implementation of the digital literacy program in primary schools, popularly known as the laptop project. Honorable Speaker, the digital literacy program is estimated to have received a budgetary allocation of about 20 billion shillings for supply of tablets for the 1.2 million children in public primary schools, in addition to entrenching ICT in the teaching and learning process and management of education in primary schools. For clarity, Mr. Speaker, in the financial year 2018-2019, which is this year, the program was allocated Kenya shilling 11.9 billion for equipping schools with tablets and enhancing the ICT capacity of teachers. As of today, statistics show that about 19,000 out of the 23,951 public schools have received the tablets. Honorable Speaker, the program appears to have faced a number of challenges. In fact, a spot check of schools in my constituency, I observed that many schools appear not to be utilizing the tablets provided, as the teachers are not adequately trained or conversant with the gadgets, and there is lack of power, connectivity, and internet in some schools. Honorable Speaker, it is in this regard that I wish the chairperson of the Departmental Committee on Education and Research to provide a statement on the following. 1, the level of utilization of tablets across the country. 2, the steps taken to ensure the program is a success. And 3, the measures taken to ensure that value for money is achieved through use of the tablets. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
By default, Honorable Kanini Kega, the table office listed your statement for this afternoon, which was wrong. But nevertheless, you will have my sympathy, and I direct that the statement be issued by the chairperson of the Departmental Committee on Education and Research when the House resumes after the short recess. This is an intervention by the member for Endebess, Vice Chair Energy.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I stand to seek guidance from the Speaker's chair on a matter that is touching the committee. Mr. Speaker, this is in reference to our oversight role as a committee into the sagas. One, the Kenya pipeline. Mr. Speaker, we've written several times to both the board chair and the MD, Mr. Josang, to appear before the committee. And these officers have declined to appear before the committee, and they cite the issue that the matter is being investigated by the DCI and the EACC. Mr. Speaker, the matters that are before the committee are serious matters. There are issues of corruption that is massive in the saga, and therefore the committee has on several times written to them. And the worst of all, Mr. Speaker, was today when the MD Josang called the clerk to instead of even writing a letter and explaining himself of why he cannot appear before the committee. He calls the clerk and tells the clerk that let the committee write to me saying that I must appear before the committee. And therefore, we think that this saga, this Kenya pipeline is in contempt of the committee, and therefore they have declined to come and appear before the committee. And this can be supported by my chair, Mr. Kikaria, because we feel, Honorable Kikaria, we feel, Mr. Speaker, that we need your guidance on a matter that is before the committee and is a matter that is being investigated by other agencies. Because as a committee, we even feel that the investigations that are being done is just firefighting and not addressing the whole issue, so that people can forget about the issues, but these are issues that persist. We have issues of pertaining to the Line 5, which is the pumping of the fuel from Mombasa to Nairobi. We have issues of the Cheti line, which is in Kisumu, and we feel that there are serious issues that needs to be addressed by the committee, and we want the Kenya pipeline to shed light on it. When we even approach the website, because the issue of information, the issue of access to information is a constitutional right. On access to the website, Mr. Speaker, they have lowered, they have interfered with it such that we cannot access the necessary information as a committee for us to make decisions. They have, I think they...
Order number 8, motion. Report on the audited financial statements for the National Government Constituencies Development Fund for the constituencies in Nairobi County.
Well, honour members, including the member who is trotting, don't just look down, you know. It may well be that you are being careful not to trip. Honour members, debate on this motion was concluded last Thursday. What remained was for the question to be put, which I hereby do. That this House adopts the second report of the Special Funds Accounts Committee on audited financial statements for the National Government Constituency Development Fund for constituencies in Nairobi City County for the financial years 2013-2014, 2014-2015, 2015-2016, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, October 3, 2018. Will as many as other opinions say aye? Aye. As many as the contrary opinions say no. The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 9, the Warehouse Receipt System Bill, Senate Bill number 10 of 2017, second reading.
Leader of Majority. Maybe Leader Majority can use the dispatch box.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, you need to, as the chair of Parliament Service Commission, you need to crack the whip on the department that deals with ICT. Even the purported iPads, I doubt if they are used. So we need to find out whether they should be there or we need to replace them. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the Warehouse Receipts Bill, Senate Bill number 10 of 2017, be read and defines a warehouse receipt system as part of the whole of the process of depositing commodities in a licensed warehouse, the issuance of the warehouse receipt reflecting the quantity and the quality of the deposited commodity. It also deals with the management of the transfer of these receipts as a document of the title and includes, but of course not limited to, the regulations of warehouses and of course actors associated with this process, including other players, the transporters, the fumigation companies. In the second part of the bill, Mr. Speaker, the bill provides for the establishment of what will be referred to as, if the House agrees with, Warehouse Receipt System Council as a body corporate. A council that will have a full membership. And in that section, we are dealing with the qualification of the members, the function and the powers of the council. It provides for the office of the Chief Executive Officer of this council, who shall be responsible for the day-to-day management of the activities of that council. Honorable Speaker, moving on in part 3 of the bill, it provides to the refusal of an entity to grant a license, the imposition of any conditions on when granting that license, the revocation and the suspension, or altogether variation of the warehouse receipt license, of course, and then also a decision of a warehouse inspector and any other decision of the council. So the Warehouse Receipts Appeals Committee will deal with where, in the opinion of an individual or a corporate entity, feels that the council made a decision contrary to law. Part 4 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, provides for the issuance of the warehouse receipts for agricultural product deposited in a particular warehouse. The information that the receipt must contain, so there will be a document known as a warehouse receipt that must be provided to the vendor, to the person who wants to deposit goods or cereals to the warehouse. And the information that the receipts must contain is provided for in part 4 of the bill. And the receipt must contain, Mr. Speaker, the establishment of a central registry operated by the council for the purpose of registering all the transactions that takes place within the process of the warehouse receipt system. The replacement of lost goods, the replacement, the replacement of stolen or destroyed receipts, and the status of a duplicate receipts issued. Honorable Speaker, Part 5 of the bill provides for the obligation of the warehouse operator upon the receipts, including the liability for loss of goods. So Part 5 deals with basically the obligation that the operator of that warehouse is faced with in the event that, for example, there is liability for loss of goods to persons to those which are not lawfully entitled to those goods, and of course, whether the goods were covered within the procedure of the warehouse receipt or proceeds of goods for the lawful charges in the storage contract. So there will be a contract between the warehouse operator and the people who will use that system. Part 6 of the bill provides for, of course, negotiation and transfer of receipts by endorsement and delivery to another person. It gives the right acquired after the negotiation that will take place within the warehouse receipt system. Finally, Honorable Speaker, the Part 7 and 8 of the bill provides for, of course, penal provisions, such as when one issues a fraudulent receipts. We are in an era where people create their own receipts, they create their own documents, which are not owned by that entity, which are not recognized by the warehouse receipt system. So there are certain penalties that are provided for in Part 6 and 7. 7 and 8. And then, of course, finally, in that bill, Mr. Speaker, we have the miscellaneous provisions on regulations or the powers of the Cabinet Secretary that he will make in consultation with the Warehouse Receipts Council. Speaker, it's a small bill, but very, very important for the economy and for better storage of grain in our country. Is the first time this bill, Mr. Speaker, was passed by the National Assembly in the 11th Parliament, and of course, like many other bills, it collapsed in the Senate. But this time, the Senate had the chance to publish afresh, and now I am sure if this House agrees with the amendments of the Senate, we'll push it for it to be concluded before we go on the small recess. Speaker, that is the highlights of this bill. The Chair of Agriculture, who will second this bill, of course, has engaged the stakeholders concerning this bill, and I'm sure in seconding he will give us what were the views and the concerns and the addition that the stakeholders, when they were engaged, had to say in making sure that this piece of legislation is enriched as we debate and prepare it for committee of the whole House. I beg to move and ask Honorable Aden, the Member of Parliament for LWAC and Chair of Agriculture, to second.
Yeah, Chair Agriculture.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. From the onset, I rise to second this bill. Honorable Speaker, as a committee, we had a look at this bill in details and are of the view that this bill is long overdue and it is very important to the economy of this country and especially the agricultural sector. Mr. Speaker, the Warehouse Receipt System Bill 2017 was sponsored by the Senate Majority Leader. The bill having been considered and passed in accordance with Senate Standing Order was forwarded to the National Assembly for consideration. Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to provide a legal framework for the development and regulation of warehouse receipt system for agricultural commodity for the purpose to provide for the establishment of a warehouse receipt council to oversight and regulate the implementation of the warehouse receipt system. Mr. Speaker, the bill further sets out the process of depositing commodities, issuance and transfer of receipts to regulation of activities involving agricultural produce. It also provides for the establishment of the Council and Warehouse Receipts Appeals Committee, which make up the warehouse receipt system. Mr. Speaker, over the years, the major problems we have had, which has been identified as affecting small-scale farmers, has something to do with the storage, and as a result of poor storage, then we have the commodity losses. Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to mitigate on the post-harvest loss as well as mitigate on price fluctuations. Mr. Speaker, the warehouse bill receipt system, warehouse itself, warehouse receipts are documents issued by warehouse operator as evidence that specified commodity of stated quantity and quality have been deposited at a particular location. Simply means a depositor, a farmer, a trader would bring in the commodities into a registered warehouse, deposits the wares for a certain fee, leaves the commodity in the warehouse operator grades and then keeps the commodity on behalf of the farmer. The title of the product or the commodity is with the depositor. In that case, he is issued with a warehouse receipt system, which is transferable, and the farmer can take it to the bank, he can take it to any other person who would give him money on the basis of the receipt, and so that the farmer can be able to meet his or her long or short-term obligations. Mr. Speaker, the warehouse operator holds the stored commodity by way of safe custody, implying that he is legally liable to make good any value lost through theft or damage by fire and other catastrophes, but has no legal or beneficial interest in it. Mr. Speaker, the receipts may be transferable, that is allowing the new holder a lender, means where the stored commodity is pledged as security for a loan, or a trade counterparty which entitles the holder to take delivery of the commodity upon presentation of the warehouse receipt at the warehouse. In relation to this part 4, in relation to the part 6 of the bill provides for the negotiations and transfer of receipts. Clause 38 of the bill provides that a warehouse receipt issued to a person may be negotiated by endorsement and delivery to another specified person. Means the warehouse receipt, upon deposit of the commodity to a warehouse, the depositor can be able to give this warehouse receipt, which is endorsed, to a third party to be able to obtain a bank facility, for example. Mr. Speaker, the prospective benefit of this system would include the following. Warehouse receipt system provides the flow of trade. Mr. Speaker, it also enhances market efficiency. Mr. Speaker, that means the product, once stored in a warehouse, it can be then traded efficiently between persons who are willing to trade with the commodity and thus be able to increase the flow and frequency of business in the economy. So, Mr. Speaker, the other benefit that we get out of this warehouse receipt system is it mitigates on the price fluctuation. What the farmer would essentially do is to bring the warehouse, the commodity into warehouse. If the farmer is not in need of the cash immediately, it will mean that the commodity will be deposited, and and this commodity will still remain in the warehouse and does not need to really be transferred or be sold at a throwaway price. So it can really be kept in the warehouse until such a time the prices are right, and the producer can therefore think of selling it at the prevailing market price at a premium. Mr. Speaker, the warehouse receipt system also provides or facilitates trade by enabling commodities of known description to be assembled at a stated location. A warehouse receipt system facilitates impersonal trade by reducing information asymmetry between counterparties. Mr. Speaker, Clause 24 of the bill provides grading and weighing of products stored in a warehouse. Further, it is stipulated that grading of agricultural commodity shall be undertaken by agricultural commodity graders certified by the Agriculture and Food Authority. What this means is once the commodities are brought to a warehouse, they are graded by certified graders and kept in the store. It does not matter whether it is yours the next time you come and you want now to trade with your commodity. You may get the commodity of another trader, provided that it was graded and it was found to be exactly the same quality like the grains you deposited. So they may use an inventory system where they can keep or they can use what we call the first in, first out, or last in, first out system to be able to dispose of the commodities that has been stored in the warehouse. So really, once you bring your commodity into a warehouse and it is graded and checked by certified graders, you do not really need to get the same one that you had initially brought in the warehouse. You can get out any other, because after all of them are of the same quality. And Mr. Speaker, warehouse receipt system also enhances market efficiency.
There's a point of order from the Honorable Member for Arienda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm acutely aware that the member is seconding a motion. But Mr. Speaker, Standing Order number 80 also prevents a member from reading a speech. And I'm aware that the member has been reading the speech in secondment of the motion. Mr. Speaker, is that in order?
Certainly not in order. Member may make references to whatever notes there may be, but not to read.
Thank you,
and that's why we always insist that bills, people should not, don't read.
Honorable Speaker, I was only referring to clause 24 of the bill, and I quoted from there. And I was explaining, for those who are very keen at looking at me.
Sorry, if you're just referring to that clause and quoting it, then proceed.
Yes. So, Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, the warehouse, I just want to take you through the system systematically, how warehouse system works. Mr. Speaker, the depositor takes commodities to the warehouse, and then we have the operator assessing the commodities that has been brought into the warehouse. Then we have depositors pay storage fee or a consideration for the commodities that has been brought, and the warehouse operator guarantees delivery of the commodity described on the receipt. Mr. Speaker, the buyer receives commodity in the quality and the quality indicated on the warehouse. You are issued then with a receipt which are transferable. This receipt can be traded just like any other, for example, the instruments which are traded in the capital markets, in order to be able to help the farmer for those who have got short-term obligations to meet those obligations. Mr. Speaker, warehouse receipt system is long overdue. It is going to help the farmers mitigate on the price fluctuation. It is going to help the farmers to reduce post-harvest loss. And so, Mr. Speaker, I beseech this House to support and endorse this bill. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I second. Thank you.
Honourable members, I propose a question, which is that the warehouse receipt system bill, Senate Bill number 10 of 2017, be now read a second time.
The warehouse receipt is something that is recognized by banks. It is a value, a product that is also recognized by other institutions which could be lending money or could be giving any form of support in a production process. Warehouse receipting enables smallholder farmers in a country like Kenya to consolidate their commodities. It therefore gives regions possibilities to determine what they can have, what they can be, or potential, what they can produce in large amounts. In other words, you can be able to know what potential of different regions are. For instance, if producers are producing sorghum, then we can have a warehouse that is retaining sorghum or collecting the amount of sorghum, different varieties or types of sorghum that are produced in a given area, and the farmers do take this product to the warehouse. The warehousing has several, because farmers meet at the marketplace. Upon producing their products, they meet at the same time. So there is a temporary flux, temporary glut that is created, and therefore prices go down. Warehousing does take control of this. In other words, through warehousing, the products are not released to the market at the same time. They are contained in the warehouse and then sold progressively. It also enables price determination. In price determination, various areas will produce different products, and these products will be contained in the warehouses and progressively released to the market depending on the need. So products released upon demand will therefore maintain the prices at a stable level. Warehousing enables different areas to declare their potentials and also to declare their products. In other words, we can be able to ensure availability of different products at different times, and this has a connotation of supporting investment or focused investment. What I'm talking about, Mr. Speaker, is that we can focus as a country through warehouse receipting in the way we want to organize our industrialization or our manufacturing. Investment in agriculture will mainly be driven by the availability of raw materials. Being the key driver to investment, then it is possible for us to determine what quantities of a given product we have in a given area. Knowledge of the quantities of products in a given area enables the investors to make very wise decisions in terms of what kind of investments to make. Because through warehousing, we are able to know what kind of product is produced in a given area and the amounts of these products over time. Then an investor can make an informed decision on how much of this product will be available across the year. So warehouse receipting, therefore, will enable the farmers to secure better prices, not just good prices and stable prices.
That is provided in this law. Mr. Speaker, the warehouse operators will have a big responsibility, and therefore their obligations to the farmers must be in law. Then there must be negotiation systems of how these receipts can be transferred or even used in banks or even used in cooperatives. That is in place. And then they have even established an appeal committee so that if there is any dispute between the farmer and the warehouse or the traders, that can be resolved. So, Mr. Speaker, With those, I support this, but I must really caution, it's a very complex system, and when we put it in place, the systems must work. And I'm sure if it works well, NCPB will definitely die. I don't think we'll need it. In my view, it has given us a lot of problems. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Westlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to contribute to this bill. Mr. Speaker, the agriculture sector in Kenya, Mr. Speaker, is dominated by small-scale farmers. And Mr. Speaker, records show that 2016, these small-scale farmers, Mr. Speaker, contributed 32.6% of the GDP. And Mr. Speaker, in recent years, Kenya has experienced a lot of experienced food deficit, resulting, Mr. Speaker, from low production and post-harvest losses. Mr. Speaker, majority caused by poor storage. This leads, Mr. Speaker, to huge income losses by small-scale farmers and higher prices. Mr. Speaker, this bill is going to address some of these vices to reduce the wastage and also improve the storage. Mr. Speaker, the warehouse receipt document that provides proof of ownership of commodities stored in warehouse will allow farmers to avoid selling after harvest when, Mr. Speaker, the prices are depressed. By enabling them, Mr. Speaker, to deposit their commodities in certified warehouses, which issues them with receipt that serves as document of title. This can in turn, Mr. Speaker, be used as security for short-term credit and helping the mobilize funds, Mr. Speaker. The bill proposes, Mr. Speaker, a mechanism for certification of warehouses, sets regulatory institutional framework. It stipulates, Mr. Speaker, standards for warehouse receipt and establishes central registry system where users confirm the validity of receipt issued. Mr. Speaker, this same bill provides for the negotiation and transfer of receipts, this being negotiation by endorsement. Mr. Speaker, when this bill enacted and well implemented, this proposed law has the potential to create stable warehousing receipt system in Kenya, Mr. Speaker. This will include allowing the National Cereals and Produce Board to avail their excess storage capacity to farmers and other grain sector. Mr. Speaker, this bill is very important, and I believe that passage of this bill, Mr. Speaker, this is a good legislation, is going to address various gaps in our food security. And we have seen, Mr. Speaker, that in the past, the farmers, even at the moment, are crying, Mr. Speaker, that NCPB, Mr. Speaker, are unable even to accommodate all the farmers. And also, there is a clearing gap in addressing, Mr. Speaker, the ownership. Some farmers end up losing their commodity, Mr. Speaker, because they cannot access storage. And poor storage, it causes wastage, and also most of the commodities are destroyed. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill will address the gap that exists in our current storage system, and also the security of the farmers, and it also address the markets, Mr. Speaker, that can also bring the farmers, Mr. Speaker, to incorporate in this bill. Mr. Speaker, I want to support this bill, and I believe that the system that will be established will address these clearing gaps, and Mr. Speaker, it will also address the issue of food security, because when we don't have proper storage, it will create poverty, it will increase the prices, it will bring a lot of complication to the farmer, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I support the bill. Thank you very much.
To hear some voice not similar to that one. Member for Migori County.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate you for being gender sensitive. As mothers, you know, we are more keen on food issues than anybody else. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this bill and add my voice to the colleagues that have spoken. I think it is in the common or public domain that Kenyans struggle every year in and year out to produce food, all sorts of foods ranging from vegetables to cereals to cash crops and etc. But the greatest challenge that we have always had as a nation facing farmers is the post-harvest handling of our agricultural produce. And this bill, as outlined, seems the issue of food security, but also value that our farmers get from the produce that they have. The concept of warehousing, especially if it is managed such that they are spread all over the country, will also facilitate, I think, better knowledge and capacity of our farmers to be able to own and manage their own produce in a way that will always make sure that they are together and they can raise a stronger bargaining power, especially when it comes to the time of disposing these goods to a buyer, and this will raise definitely their financial income. The receipting of these goods, if properly managed and it is followed up, then the farmers will be able to have something like a security. For example, I've seen when people own pieces of land, even before they are given title deeds, they have some letter of allotment, and that still gives them the entitlement to transact business using these documents. And the same thing will apply to the farmers when they get these receipts that says this is theirs and they can sell it and transfer and transact business in a lighter way without having to look for transport to carry this produce to the market and back and forth, and they end up raising the cost of production as opposed to raising their profit margins. Madam Speaker, I really want to appreciate the draft of this bill because it looks like it's fully comprehensive. It addresses the component of the chain value management right from the farm up to the time when these goods would be disposed into the market to the end users. And I think it is a good bill that if implemented, our farmers will have a relief.
Order. The Honorable Ochieng Award, the member for Migori. A member is out of order. Honorable member. Order. Honorable member, you don't cross from one side to the other. Please, can you go back, bow, and cross over to speak to the member? I didn't want to mention the name, but you forced me to do it. Very well. Very well. Thank you. Yes, just carry on.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, this house sometimes confuses members, and I was saying that if we allow the members, the farmers, to be owners of their own produce in their own warehouses, then we will see a scenario where losses such as has been experienced in the past by members of this republic when the National Cereal Board sometimes take their produce and then they are not even paid on time, will not arise. And we will encourage our farmers to be better managers of their own produce. So, Madam Speaker, I would like to support this bill and only request that upon its implementation, the farmers would be more empowered to manage the whole process of this, and whichever bodies that will be put in place work with a lot of transparency and a matter of accountability so that we don't end up with scenarios where we have losses in these warehouses. But otherwise, I want to submit that it is a good bill. It can solve many problems for the farmers. It will add value to our crops and our farm produce so that we don't throw them away when the prices are low because our farmers do not have where to store them. My only prayer as we move on would be that as we implement it, we make sure that these warehouses are spread all over the country, not brought to Nairobi again, but in the farms where our farmers are actually living and can access them. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I support.
Thank you, the member for Migori County. The member from Diwa, the Honorable Martin Owino, next on my request list.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. I rise to support this bill from the onset. Madam Speaker, Diwa as a sub-county's food basket for the whole county of Homa Bay. It's only that the capacity have not been enhanced because we don't have warehousing system. If this is put in place, Madam Speaker, if this...
Order, Honorable Ndiwa. A member has just walked in, but of course, if there's any out of order, maybe it would be noted. There's an intervention by the Honorable Milio Diambo. Milio Diambo, what is out of order and you've just walked in? So what is out of order, Honorable Milio?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's the honorable member who is my neighbor and my friend in order to mislead the House that Ndiwa is the food basket of the county when it is Suba North that is the food basket supplying the fish in the whole county.
Honorable Milio Diambo, you know you like pronouncing yourself in a style. Yeah, we are all aware that you're the member for Suba, and this time the Milia Koth. Actually, you should change your name to
Madam Speaker, that is... This
is a house of debate. When it gets to your time, you let the House know. And of course, we are yet to investigate and find, but that is not our interest as of now. Let the honorable member, the member for Diwa, debate. And I knew nothing was, but today she's in red. So yes, carry on.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At one point, Suba was in Dewa, so she could be as well right to say that before it was divided. But Madam Speaker, what I'm trying to say is that Dewa has small-scale farmers who are really struggling and working hard to produce their crops for food and also for commercial basis. Right now, we have a bumper harvest, but they are being sold so cheaply. Like a tin of corn is going for 30 shillings or 40 at most. Why? Because the storage facilities are not there for the farmers to do so. So when this is introduced, Madam Speaker, I think the spoilage will go down and the household income will rise because they will be having those receipts which stands in for security. And this can cascade to paying school fees, that children do not drop out of school, reduce poverty, and even the destruction which is being seen now by pests will go down drastically. Also, we believe in their constituency that we can even export beyond Homa Bay County if this system is introduced. So I really support this with a caveat that it should be well regulated, that it doesn't lead to another corruption in the storehouse. And also, it should also have an insurance. Should we have this warehouse system gutted down by fire, then the farmer does not lose. I want also to add that this will improve value system for the crops done. In my constituency, we are very optimistic that the corn that we grow will get good value, the nuts will get good value, and on top, then we will be ready to have value addition to all the crops that we produce. So I really support this, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the time. May the mover and also the seconder be blessed in this as they introduce. Thank you.
Very well, very well. The member for Mwea, Honorable Wachira Kabinga.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving this opportunity to contribute to this very important bill. Madam Speaker, I come from a constituency that would greatly benefit from this bill. Madam Speaker, this bill has the potential to address some of the challenges that our farmers have been experiencing, and more so when it comes to selling their produce at a haste. Madam Speaker, through this bill, farmers will have an opportunity to now store their produce and sell when prices stabilize or when need arise. Madam Speaker, farmers will also be able to now store their produce and be able to walk into banks and negotiate for some facility to enable them to wait until prices stabilize. Madam Speaker, in the past, farmers, and especially where I come from, farmers would sell their rice at a throwaway price, because by the time they harvest their rice, they have exhausted all their resources within the period of planting and taking care of that rice to the harvesting. It will now be an opportunity for them to be able to store their rice in groups, in cooperatives, in a well taken care of warehouse, and be able to wait until prices stabilize. Madam Speaker, I support this bill, hoping that a number of things will be done, that there will be a clear and deliberate way of educating our small-scale farmers on these warehouses, so that they can take advantage of them, so that Madam Speaker, we do not create another area of brokers who would benefit from such warehouses, who would be buying rice again or other produce from farmers, quickly take them to the warehouses, rush to the banks, get money, go back to the farmers, still buy at cheap prices, and they enrich themselves. I am hoping that some measures will be put in place to ensure that we create awareness and properly educate our small-scale farmers to be able to benefit from these warehouses. The other area that I would really hope that the implementing agency will be looking at is on the licensing, Madam Speaker, to put in place so that only those people who produce serious bonds and insurances from reputable insurance companies and reputable banks will be licensed, Madam Speaker. The issue of the county executive officers licensing and notifying the warehousing council after 7 days is a good one, but not enough. We need to be very, very, very clear on that. We have had at the high end banks cruising with people's money. We don't want warehouses that will come, collect farmers' produce and run away or cruise or mishandle the produce, and when asked to pay, they can't pay. These are areas that we really must be very keen to look at. The issue of commingling same type produce is a good one, but again, it has to be handled with care. Otherwise, we compromise on the quality of produce that has been delivered by farmers, Madam Speaker. If these issues are properly taken care of, we will see a clear improvement on our farmers' welfare, on our farmers' economic welfare, Madam Speaker. The situation out there has been pathetic. And for record in this house, I would want to say that now, for example, we are just about to get our harvest in rice. The prices would go as low as 35 or 45, when the actual price is supposed to be about 80 shillings per kilo of paddy. The difference, from the difference one can tell the kind of exporting to NCPB and declare through their receipts what they have in the warehouse to be given subsidized fertilizers, Madam Speaker. Because as it is, our farmers are walking into private sector, into shops, and they are given fertilizers at very high cost. And they end up, Madam Speaker, in getting all the losses of their produce. People out there taking advantage of our farmers who probably are not able to calculate their production costs, who have been there over time with no one taking care of them. I would want to see a situation where NCPB, other agencies like National Irrigation Board come and work together with the warehousing receipt system through the council to now clearly help farmers to enjoy the fruits of their work. And this can work if there is goodwill. I know it's in the subsidiary regulations where the rubber meets the road, and I am hopeful that through the committee, the House Committee on Agriculture, which has been quite active in this area, will work with the ministry to come up with proper subsidiary regulations to regulate these warehousing receipts to ensure that they do not come to enrich the already rich, but to take care of the small-scale farmer who has been suffering over years out there. With those few remarks in my contribution, Madam Speaker, I want to fully support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The member for Kathiani. Let's hear what is in Machakos and farmers.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to contribute to this bill on the warehouse receipt system bill, which is a bill that seeks to provide a legal framework for the development and regulation of a warehouse receipt system for agricultural commodities. Madam Speaker, agriculture is a very important in Kenya because generally we are an agricultural economy. In fact, just Googling, I noticed that agriculture is the largest contributor to our GDP, that half of Kenyan farmers do subsistence farming and the other half are the ones that do it for commercial purposes. And that we are a leading producer in tea and coffee in the world. But, Madam Speaker, Kenyan farmers are really some of the most overworked, underpaid, underutilized people within this country. In fact, they are also among the poorest. That is why you find there's a lot of exodus from the rural area to the city because they expect that in the city you'll be able to earn more. So, Madam Speaker, this bill, this Senate bill is extremely important because it actually tends to look for solutions for our farmers, and some of the things they'll assist our farmers with is dealing with issues of surplus. Recently in Kitui County, the governor did an excellent job. I went and marketed the growing of green grams. And so a lot of farmers there were given the seeds and the fertilizer and went ahead and planted. But after they harvested, there was a problem because they had a surplus. Getting a market to sell was difficult. And of course, there were no warehouses where they could forward that product to, which they would have kept in storage, and they would have their documentation showing the quality, quantity that they have there, which would have helped them in future. Unfortunately, because this kind of system is not there, a lot of farmers had to kind of sell their produce at throwaway prices. So this would be able to deal with that. Again, of course, on the issue of marketing, it's important because when you put commodities together, it helps the farmer and, of course, the people to be able to market. Because you cannot market your green grams alone. But when you put them together in a warehouse, it becomes easier because then you're trading together with others. And of course, there's the idea of economies of scale kicks in. And of course, when you're together and working together, it becomes easier to find the market. So I think this is excellent. In fact, it will be able to create a perfect situation for our farmers, where they grow their crops, take them to their warehouse, they get their receipts, they can, trade with the receipts. Whenever they have issues, they know they can access that product in whatever way that this bill allows. So I think it's definitely a very good thing. But, Madam Speaker, I have noted a few issues in the bill that I think needs to be addressed by this House because it's already come from the Senate and we have to make a decision. First and foremost, it's important to note that there are other legislations coming up on different commodities. Coffee will have its own bill, its own act. Tea will have its own bill, its own act, and a lot of other, agricultural commodities. This bill has put them all together. But I do believe that when it comes to handling coffee, when it comes to handling tea, when it comes to handling other commodities, there might be differences here and there. So it's important for the bill to address itself to what happens when we are dealing with coffee, what happens when we are dealing with tea. It is silent. It has just grouped them together, and we know that there might be specialized needs for each different commodity that we will be trading in. The other issue, Madam Speaker, I've noticed is that there's this issue of the Warehouse Receipt System Council. It's very important. It has very good work. But I have seen one of the members is supposed to be a member representing farmers in Kenya. Madam Speaker, I do not know how they will be able to identify that one member. Because Kenyan farmers are tea farmers. They expect to have a member. Coffee farmers, like myself and our region, expect to have someone. Tea farmers expect to have someone. The sugarcane farmers expect to have someone there. Livestock farmers from the arid areas expect someone to be representing them. Even fish farmers expect someone. Maize farmers, even chicken farmers. So, Madam Speaker, when we say that we are going to have a person representing farmers, how are they going to identify this person? I think it needs to be either we have several people or we be very specific, maybe a farmers association, and we specify which one, so that it doesn't end up, ending up being that the representation is not fair for some of the farmers within the country. Madam Chair, there is the issue, of course, of, I support the idea that the chair and the vice chair of this council cannot come from the Warehouse Receipt Systems Council, should not come from the same gender. That makes a lot of sense. But I also have noticed that, of course, there is a requirement to do a third gender on the membership. How, again, are we going to address this? Consider manipulation, chances of forgery, chances of exploitation become high. I would have proposed that if we want to move this country and we are coming up with systems that are developed, why don't we just encourage the use of the electronic form? Because if we do so, then the identification of ownership becomes by biometric, and then we can also ensure that whatever is put in the system cannot be manipulated easily. It's easier to manipulate physical documents than it is to manipulate things electronically. So I think, other than, of course, the last general election, otherwise, Madam Chair, I think that it is important that we address these issues so that by the time we pass this bill, it goes and supports our people. Finally, Madam Chair, the issue of who manages the warehouses. Now we are coming up with a situation where all the important produce from our farmers goes into warehouses to be managed there. Have we really thought about vetting of the people that will be managing these warehouses? Because we've allowed the authority to give these licenses to the county government, which is okay because within the law, this is a devolved function. But what kind of vetting systems have we put in place so that we are sure that the people who will be managing food, our produce in the warehouses, are people that can be trusted? Otherwise, we may be jumping from the pan to the fire. Otherwise, Madam Chair, I support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Before the member from Makweli, I give to the member for Funyula. Let's hear what is in Funyula. Urondo Ojambo.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise to support the bill before the House today, basically because it's long overdue and it has tried to bring into force what has been happened in other commodities like the stock exchange, properties, and other derivatives in the market. I support the warehouse receipt system, basically considering Kenya is a primarily agricultural country, considering that the people of Funyula who elected me basically depend on agricultural products for their survival. I must also commend the drafters, the Senate plus the mover, and the proposer for the bill to have basically had the time to bring the bill to this House for deliberation. That said and done, the warehousing system, Madam Speaker, gives the farmers several advantages. While not trying to repeat what my colleagues have said, number one, it stabilizes prices of goods, agricultural commodities. Madam Speaker, we have, for some strange reason, our season for production is almost at the same time throughout the country. Most in the western region, we produce at the same time, and obeying the laws of supply and demand, where supply exceeds demand, definitely the prices plummet below occasionally the production cost. For example, in my constituency, in this year, we have a bumper harvest and a tin of maize, which other times costs as high as 100 or 115, has been retailing at 35 or 30 shillings per tin. That essentially is below the cost of production, but since the farmers have to dispose in order to get cash, they have no choice but to dispose. Secondly, it will reduce the cost of storage that the farmers have to incur. Many times, one of the greatest challenges we have in the agricultural sector is loss as a result of post-harvest loss. We trust and believe the warehouses will be run professionally, will minimize loss of agricultural products as a result of bad storage facilities or inadequate storage facilities. Thirdly, Madam Speaker, I trust that the central registry, as proposed in the bill, will try as much as possible allow the certificates issued by the warehouse operators to become security for financial facility. Unfortunately, looking through the act, that particular aspect is not expressly stated as it's, for example, stated in the Land Act. The only reference which gives an inclination or an indication that they need to securitize these certificates is the membership of the council, which has got one person nominated by a financial sector regulatory forum. We would wish at the third reading to introduce probably amendments that reinforce the use of these certificates as security for acquisition of loans and other financial facilities from agricultural financial corporation and other mainstream financial sectors. Madam Speaker, I have my own reservation about the management of the warehouses. My colleague has mentioned it. Probably, just like we do for SACCOs, we do for cooperative societies, other than the investor in the warehouse system itself, the managers must be tested and found fit to manage those warehouses. Otherwise, we are going to have a situation like where we have the PSV, where the losses are going to be massive, and insurers and underwriters will start avoiding warehouse receipt system to avoid not issuing insurance facilities. Madam Speaker, as a country, we also need to really invest in these issues. I can see then we have the council, then we have another registry maintained by the county government. My fear is that we are going to have a necessary duplication, and a country being riddled with corruption, we hope and pray the two levels of registration and inspection will not be an avenue for corruption. As I conclude, the penalties provided for under Section 48 of the bill seems to be too lenient. They seem to be too lenient, providing for only a penalty of 100,000 for any breach or any contravention of the provision of the Act seems to be too lenient. We would request at the third reading, we need to enhance so that we enforce professionalism, we enforce integrity, and we avoid cases of corruption. Of course, the issue of electronic system needs to be seriously considered, because this country, again, we are beset with the case of forgery, we are beset with the case of misappropriation or misrepresentation. We need a foolproof system that avoids cases where farmers would make losses or where warehouse operators will be saddled with very many claims and take so much time to litigate and ascertain the true position. With those few remarks, Madam Speaker.
Because on the 11th Parliament, I was in the Committee of Agriculture, and we had done this bill, and in fact, recently, the National Assembly bill was appearing in the order paper, but before it was reached, the Senate, who killed our 11th Parliament bill, had already copied the same, and they debated it quickly, and now it has come. So it's like it's a crossbreed. Now that it has been seconded by our chair for agriculture, it means that our chair of agriculture would a similar bill previously before this House has agreed with the Senate in totality. Actually, it's proper jurisdiction in the Senate because it is addressing matters in the counties. And the country of Kenya is very lucky now. It has an opportunity to address the perennial problem of NCPB and the theft and the irregularities which has been happening there under the management of the Ministry of Agriculture. This one is too tired. It can be handled from the national side, and it will also be counter-checked by the county governments. There are many gaps because we have copied this system from the Indian experience, Madam Speaker. It has a lot of challenges in how it's going to fit here. I am aware of the Eastern African Grain Council, which has been doing a similar thing, but because of lack of support by the county governments or national government, it was private business entrepreneurs, and together with the people who grow crops in the country, has also its own share of problems, failures and successes. And a lot of Kenyans had complained on that system because the Kenyans will surrender their grains, then they will wait for the council to sell, and then eventually they will be paid. And it went through the normal problems we've been having in the country. And we can only make this law better, other than a copy from the Indian experience, which has been very successful. We can only make this law better by improving it at third reading to an extent that it should kill the NCPBB Act and the National Serious Board Act, because we will be having two parallel systems which are doing the same thing, and they should be synchronized by law. You know, there are also several other acts of Parliament, the Crops Act, which deal with the same thing. We now have the Coffee Act and its regulations. We have the Tea Act and its regulations, with the Sugar Act. All these things will end up in warehouses. It has serious financial implications, Madam Speaker, because then who is going to develop these warehouses and this system? How is it going to be managed? That must come out in this law so that we avoid the cartels and the systems which have been there before. We have heard of electronic system versus a manual system. I believe the two of them should complement each other, such that you have a manual receipt system and you have an electronic receipt system which should tie, so that the farmer keeps their records manually and electronically. They can be assessed in a system, and they can know at anyone's given time how much of their produce is still in the stores, how much has been marketed, and how much is being left. And therefore, the issue of marketing comes back of the farmer's produce, and the issue of cooperatives. Already in the country and in the counties, you will see a lot of cooperatives warehouses, which now the county governments are managing very well. In Makueni, we've got one in Kadonzweni, and we've got one in a place called Ukia, which is very beautiful and has been beautified by the cooperative there at a place called Mukuyuni. And you can see they make storage of even fertilizers. We have also in Makueni a storage of grains which had been built by the national government. How are we going to utilize the infrastructure which exists, part of it which was funded by government, and the private entrepreneurs who now come up with a new business system of warehouses all over the country, whereby Kenya is an agricultural country. We have grains everywhere. The rains are just about to start, so in a few months, you'll have grains which needs storage, which needs marketing, everywhere. Recently, there were heavy rains. A lot of food was produced. The quality of the food, the storage of the food, to ensure that it doesn't get moldy, it doesn't get aflatoxin, and the processing, value addition. You know, in Galana Golalu, we started irrigation for maize. And I remember the President Uhuru Kenyatta challenging the first team which went there when we went to launch this irrigation, that they should not follow him to Nairobi, and that it should grow up to 1 million acres, and that has been his dream. And I believe it's going to be realized now with the construction of Wake Dam in Makueni, and we are going to have a lot of produce all over the country. How are we going to manage this produce for the benefit of the farmer? I have not seen that answer in this bill. How are we going to solve the current problems you saw in Eldoret, where farmers are wishing that they were dead other than live in a country whereby their seed is stolen, where people forge evidence that they have supplied to warehouses owned by National Cereals Board produce of up to 200 million, which is a forgery, and which is a theft, and which squeezes Kenyans. This law should be addressing this problem. The Senate went to witness in the Rift Valley. We should be able to improve the lives of farmers in this country using this law. Now, Parliament and Senate have the opportunity to solve farmers' problems once and for all. But if we don't amend these laws seriously and substantially at third reading, it is as useless as the NCBB Act. It will not be useful to the country. It will result into same failure, mainly because of corruption and the systems which are loosely tied, such that people can maneuver and be able to con the farmers. So we need to address these matters once and for all, finally using this law. And it can only happen when we make, and I'll be one of the people in this house, one of the members making amendments in third reading to strengthen it and to make proposals to swallow, to be able to amend or delete the National Cereals Produce Board Act, which does not conform to the Constitution, especially after devolution came in. Agriculture and its products are devolved. What is the role of the counties in the current system of grain storage? We have farmers suffering all over because the national government is handling it. The county government is not counter-checking. We should make sure that at anyone's given instant, our farmers are able to know what is the status of their produce being sold. What do we do with the grains which are being imported into the country irregularly through our porous borders, through the borders officially, through the borders unofficially, and through the ports? More grain keep on coming here, while our own farmers are keeping their grains in their barns in the Rift Valley. So we want a situation where that farmer no longer now stores food in his or her farm, but now takes it to a warehouse, gets it receipted. It can be sold immediately or later, but they know the value of their goods, the value of their grain is kept and is likely to be useful to them sooner or later. A lot of farmers are unable to pay school fees. They have worked very hard, they have produced food worth a lot of money, and they are suffering as people who don't receive range. They are also receiving food rations from the government in Makueni, popularly known as Molio. And now we have a new policy that Operation Molio out through irrigation, so that no one is given food as a relief for whatever reason. You find that areas which are producing food and the farmers have worked very hard and their sweat is not rewarded, that they are suffering as a farmer in any other part of the country, from Ukambani to Wajir and the northeastern, the northern Kenya. They are the same status. So, Madam Speaker, I really want to urge members that we look at this law critically. It should not just be a duplicate borrowed from Indian experience to be practiced here, and then it doesn't bear fruits at all. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Very well. The member for Isiolo North.
Safe and properly managed warehouse systems, as a country, we are going to avoid these losses. The other issue which this bill, once it is passed into law, will help us achieve is to make sure that our goods, agricultural goods, are graded properly, the proper weightings and measurements are done properly, and therefore this again will make sure that our farmers are going to earn more from their produce and so on and so forth. And therefore, Madam Speaker, I support this bill, and I think I wish we could come up with something similar to this for livestock farmers. Thank you very much for the time.
Yeah, interest in livestock farmers. Now, members, before I give the member for Kwanza, there's a member who wants to negate, and you know this is a house of, that is expression unless use line. The Honorable Member for Togaren is not supported.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Since the debate started, everybody has supported this bill. But I want to alert the House that this is a wrong-headed legislation. And I don't fear standing alone on this. I stood alone in this House in the 11th Parliament as I warned the country about to make a three-legged stool, but forgot to put on the third leg. So that stool can't stand. There is no way this bill, this law can help the farmer in this country unless we have guaranteed minimum returns for the farmer. If the farmer takes his grain to that storage and waits for the prices to stabilize, then they sell the grain on his behalf and he gets the money. How have you guaranteed that farmer that the prices will not even fall further? They'll put the grain in those stores. These importers who are influential enough to actually get the treasury to open importation as much as they want, they'll import that grain and flood the market. That farmer will suffer. It might work for the large-scale farmer. If it's maize, for example, who has 1,000 bags and over, this might be useful for that farmer. But that small farmer who only gets about 50 bags, 70 bags a year, that farmer's problem is cash. It's not even storage. The moment he harvests, they dry it and sell it, get money. That's the only money they see in a whole year to pay fees for their children, to pay their hospital bills. There's no time that farmer has to take this grain to be stored somewhere, awaiting for the prices to improve. So what will the farmer do? He'll take it there and instruct them to sell it immediately. So that will not benefit that farmer. He'll sell it at that low price. That farmer cannot wait. So this does not help that farmer. This helps the businessmen who have been fleecing the farmers all along. And I think they're behind this bill. They're the ones behind this bill. They want now to be licensed with warehouses so that they can now fleece the farmer legally with the backing of the law. Because that way, the small-scale farmer who has got 50 bags will be forced to take his maize there because he can't wait. The person who will eventually make the profits is that warehouse owner who will pay that farmer quickly. What we are doing, we are legalizing those fellows who keep on damaging roads in my constituency with huge lorries. Like now they're really carrying away the maize, in the process damaging my roads. Now we are legalizing them to bring a warehouse there and now properly do it.
Put for you. The member for Kwanza next on my request list.
I think you deliberately made me to speak after my senior, but I want to take this opportunity to say I support this motion, and I want to allay the fear from my senior. He's also my party secretary general, that we have to advance as a country. First and foremost, I want to agree with him that this is a new system.
Own these warehouses, you might be waiting thinking, I'll go and draw down the benefits to the maize or whatever crop you had put in 6 months down the road or 4 months down the road when the warehouse is empty. When the goods have been sold on the secondary market. Now there will be litigation in the courts, which will take 10 years to settle. We would impoverish our farmers. There are risks here. A great idea, but in the wrong time, in a country that does not respect contracts, in a country that doubts the judiciary, we shan't be able to get anywhere. Our cases are taking too long. I'm aware of this system. Institutions, global institutions, have been pushing this when they felt that the public sector management system of grain handling, particularly grain, because that's where this started, although cotton can also be, has also been used, that the public marketing system has heavy financial losses for this taxpayer. And that instead of entrusting all those, collecting all those losses to the taxpayer, use market-like systems that spreads the risk and puts that risk back in the private sector through some systems of this nature. That then is going to be spread along many, many producers and so on. But here we are. We are farmers who produce a surplus for the market, but who are living at the poverty level. And that's what the problem there is, and that's why my colleague, Dr. Seli, was saying, probably subsidize the farmers. They are living at the poverty level, even though they are producing surpluses relative to their needs. So how do you ensure that you don't then push them further down? We have to think through those risks. They are major, major risks. And you don't want to end up with a system benefiting that large-scale producer, ensure that risk himself through the quasi-financial system. Now, I understand all this textbook argument that instead of you are selling, and I see that every day in my own community in Nambale, for example, throughout the month of August and September, the price per kilogram of maize, locally produced maize in the area, was about 15 shillings. They sell it in 2-kilogram units. They call them the gorogoro, the 2-kilogram old tin that used to be a Kimbo tin. That's about half of it is the price per kilogram. As low as 15 shillings a kilogram, but it does rise. In some bad years, it rises about 120 shillings per kilogram, per gorogoro, which is about 60 shillings, like 4 times more, or perhaps slightly more. So the theory is that why sell when it's at the minimum, give it to the warehousing management system. You can draw down a little cash if you need it, or simply borrow against it. And because the price will go up, when the price goes up, you can repay your loan more comfortably, and you'll draw down money when the price is at the peak or near the peak. The warehouse system does not take the risk. They go home with the trust that when the prices truly rise in the market, as you expect they will, that you can go back and cash it out. Let me remind you, in Nambale, we used to be major cotton producers. And our cotton union was one of the most important ones. What the original was back in the 60s, 50s, and so on. And there was such trust at the time, initially, that you could deliver your cotton and go back a month later when funds have been released from the Cotton Linter Seed Marketing Board through the banks as they did and collect your money. There are farmers who have died with those receipts in their pockets. If the money ever came, they never saw it. So we have a risk here of setting up a system, giving it a legal cover, and selling it as the best thing beyond sliced bread. And then setting up that system that will become a collector system that benefits itself. We may get uncontrolled imports because we don't control the global system of marketing. And when prices are supposed to be have risen from 15 shillings a kilogram in Ambare to 30 shillings a kilogram, voila, you get huge imports, and they fall back to 20. We've seen that with other commodities. We have a major risk. So it may be a great idea, but it's not at the right time for Kenya. It's not in the right context in the way we manage our institutions. And I don't believe that we can be able to manage the trust that the farmer will have placed in this. Finally, this system is espoused greatly because it's a collateral system to the deepening of the financial system. Why is it a collateral system? That through improvements like this, through the real sector, the real economy like that of commodities or like grain, you can develop the rural financial intermediation systems because instead of the farmers selling their entire grain at the beginning, they will now rely on the financial system where they can borrow from against the collateral of their commodity that's in storage. And that way, you are deepening the financial system, bringing in even those little producers who otherwise would not have been operating in that system. But now we have huge problems. We have interest capping in the financial system. They're reluctant to go there. Are we going to be able to sustain the system? All these good ideas around this have been brought into this bill. Because the guys have gone on the internet, they have visited, they have benchmarked, they have seen what's happening in other places. But the environment is not right. I have worked in India a lot.
For consumption is lost along the food value chain. And that is through the pre-harvest, harvesting itself, and post-harvest losses. And therefore, it directly impacts negatively on food and nutrition security and livelihoods of our people. I come from a county that is referred as a food basket alongside Trans Nzoia County and my county, which was Uasin Gishu. And most of our small-scale farmers actually incur a lot of losses through post-harvest. And this bill is going to go a long way in assisting the small-scale farmers. FAO also estimates that 1.3 billion metric tons of the food produced is lost globally. And proportionately, we lose about $1 trillion. So, Madam Speaker, this bill is going to ensure that the small-scale farmers are safeguarded from post-harvest losses, and therefore, they will increase the they will increase the prices of the products through increase in the quantities they hold at their warehouse. It will also ensure quality of the grain because they are going to go through a training before they deposit their produce or commodities into their warehouse. The warehouse is also going to ensure quality. It is also going to ensure that measurements or measuring out this bill because it will help our farmers use the receipt that is provided by the receipt warehouse operator as a collateral to be able to deposit in the bank and request for funds to use it even to pay fees or to do whatever other activities they want to do as part of their livelihood. So this is a very good bill that I think is going to go a long way in supporting our farmers. Our farmers can also transfer the same receipt to another person and use it or collect funds to do whatever they want as they await the market prices to improve so that they can gain better in their produce. So this bill,
as we see it, is going to really assist our good farmers. I want to support it. I want to say the quality of the produce for our farmers is going to improve. The market prices that will be speculated will improve the livelihoods of our farmers. The quality of this produce also can ensure that they can actually even request organizations like like FAO to actually purchase this commodity or the cereal grains from the warehouses, and therefore the farmers can get better returns from it. So I stand here today to support this bill, knowing that it will go a long way in safeguarding our farmer and also ensuring that there is value for their produce. At the moment as we speak, our farmers are selling the maize at around 800 shillings a bag because the biggest challenge the farmers have is the storage facilities. I want to speak to my colleague who said this is only going to benefit the large-scale farmers. That is not true. The biggest people who have a challenge are the small-scale farmers because their challenge is storage facilities. They produce, they harvest, but they have nowhere to store their produce, and therefore they incur a lot of post-harvest losses through handling of that produce in the value chain up to the National Cereals and Produce Board. And even in terms of quality, they have a lot of losses through moisture, they have a lot of losses through handling, and therefore, since we have a storage for them, which they can transfer their produce and keep them for better prices, they are going to benefit. So, Madam Speaker, I stand to support this bill. Thank you for the opportunity.
Very well, very well. The member for Kitui West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me time to contribute to this important bill. I note that warehouse receipt system enables farmers to deposit storage goods, usually grains or coffee, in exchange for warehouse receipts. And warehouse receipts is a document issued by warehouse operators as evidence that specific commodities of stated quantity and quality have been deposited with them. And this kind of system has some advantages. One of them is the storage, because some farmers may not have the storage. Another advantage is improved prices, because the goods are stored as the warehouse keepers look for market to give better prices. There is also an advantage of value addition to these commodities, like on raw pets. And for example, in our county, last season, farmers planted a lot of green the economy
county,
of the county.
Your county, Kitui County. Carry on, Honorable, you just your county.
Yes, so actually what happened is that the prices, after harvest, the prices were very low, and this really discouraged the farmers, even though they planted in plenty. And if there was such a system like warehouse receipt system, farmers would have actually stored these goods, these green grams, as they wait for the prices to improve. But since the such arrangements were not there, what happened is that they sold at a throwaway price to brokers who were buying as low prices as 30 shillings a kilo. And this has really discouraged the farmers. Even as we speak now, farmers have also harvested a lot of pigeon peas, and they have harvested a lot of it. Kitui is known to be a very dry area, so when the farmers have harvest,
they really look forward to really solving their economic problems, but it gets very discouraging. Like now, a kilo of the nzu is only going for 15 shillings a kilo, which is very low.
The nzu is in the vernacular.
Oh, sorry, the pigeon piece.
The pigeon piece.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, that is a very common name. So anyway, it's nzu in brackets, but it's pigeon piece. So it is going for 15 shillings a kilo, which is very discouraging. So if we end such an arrangement like a warehouse receipt system, then the farmers would have taken their goods there, their grains there, as they wait for the prices to improve. But now, in the future, they may be discouraged from even planting because of the poor prices, even when the goods are, the cost of farming is quite high as compared to what they are getting in exchange. We also have a problem with mangoes, which actually ripen at the same time, and this also gives the farmers a problem because at that time there are so many, the prices are so low, but if there can be value addition in this warehouse system, the mangoes could even be dried and stored for the prices to even improve in future. So even though we know that there is a problem of our fear that this system may turn out to be the case where we end cooperatives, which only enriched a few officials. Some of the cooperatives, you have some officials being enriched by this, by the system. Then since as a country we are fighting corruption, then as this one is put in place, we will have a mechanism of making sure that the farmers benefit from this arrangement by first fighting corruption and also having something like a supervisory body to oversee all the warehouse receipt, the warehouses, whereby they will be reporting to a supervisory body, and then audits will be carried out regularly to ensure that the goods are in good condition and there is no stealing, there's no corruption going on in these warehouses. So if it was a well-managed system, then our farmers would seriously benefit from this arrangement instead of just farming and all their goods go to waste because of the poor prices. So with that, Madam Speaker, I support the bill, but propose some amendments, like ensuring that there is no corruption. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Your proposed amendments are welcome at the right stage of the lawmaking process. The member for Westmore, Girango.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity. Madam Speaker, the warehouse receipt system is an idea whose type.
For members, you don't need to come to consult here. If you are the next, like Honorable, I hope that is not the next.
And the quality of the commodities to be stored in the warehouse. Therefore, that means the operator has to take into consideration that the proper quantity is taken down and the proper quality is stored. And this will go all along to ensure that the produce or the commodities that are stored in the warehouse are also insured. The bill talks about insurance. The operator will take the insurance, and therefore the commodity of the farmer will be insured. Madam Speaker, the receipt system will also go a long way to benefit the farmers, because this will serve as a collateral security in which the farmers can be able to get short-term loans. While they are waiting to sell their produce, they can also be able to expand their farming activities. This system, Madam Speaker, will also assist to store perishable commodities for example, where I come from, Madam Speaker, where we have bananas. We are unable in the Kisii land, we are unable to store bananas for a long term because this is a perishable commodity. So that if we have a warehouse now, Madam Speaker, and I'm talking about a cold warehouse, then the people of Kisii and all the people from West Mugrango will be assured that their commodity will be stored in a warehouse where we are able to obtain good prices for these commodities. Madam Speaker, I also have some reservations on the bill as drafted, more particularly on the area where it talks about the Chief Executive Officer who will be hired for a term of 3 years, and upon satisfying that he can be able to perform his solar work, the term will be extended for another 5 years. Madam Speaker, this is an area that will be able to propose an amendment when the right time comes. Finally, Madam Speaker, the Act has also gone further, or the bill has also gone further to prescribe various penalties or legal consequences the operators will have to undergo in the event they do not comply with the law. Some of these are where they will be held liable, where they issue fraudulent warehouse receipts, where they issue receipts with false information. All those regulations, all those penal consequences will ensure that the operators comply. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I support the bill. Thank you.
You support the bill. Honourable members, again, as a reminder, we are still on the Warehouse Receipt System Bill, National Senate Bill number 10 of 2017. I can see from my requests, some members have expressed to speak maybe to the other reports, like some have spoken, like for example, Honourable Manzo have spoken. So I don't know how many wanted to speak to the other. The Honourable. You wanted to speak to the report, the warehouse. Yes, some members had expressed to speak, like the members for Mumias and Manzo had already spoken to this. So the member for Masinga.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to just hear a few words on this bill. Warehousing is not new in other countries, but it is good that you are bringing it here in this country, that we can be able to warehouse our goods and the commodities and get receipts in exchange for our money. I am aware that this will improve, according to this bill. It will be able to develop and implement in conjunction with relevant bodies, government body agencies, the efficiency of the commodity, the grading, the weight, the quality, and the quantity according to this, and also assure that we are competitive even if the goods are going to be exported. Having been in the private sector, I know many of the warehousing commodities that are normally done in the warehouses. To improve on the value, especially if you go to South Africa, you'll find that the apples that are exported in Kenya are harvested and they are put in the warehouses between 6 and 8 months before they are exported to other countries. That means that they are able to get the market, they are able to export when the market is there, and they be able to sell and get value for their money. Therefore, I would support the warehousing system so that our farmers can be able to get the quality and the value for their money. If you go to a place like Del Monte, for example, the juices that they store in their warehouses for a year or two before they are processed, so that the market is able even to receive the juices when the value is high, and therefore they are able to get the value for their money. And therefore, I really support what this bill is doing. And also, if you go to Joro and the Molo, you'll find that their ADC is also trying to bring the potatoes to warehouses, whereby they are able to sell them when the time is ripe and when the value is correct. And therefore, Madam Speaker, I would like to support this because it is a good bill. The only thing that the small farmer, because is not able to wait until the prices are ready, should be able to be given the receipts and they go and they get money from the financial institutions so that they can be able to solve their problem. Otherwise, this is a good system and it should be encouraged. I support.
Thank you very well. The member for Mumias is not, yours is not a request, it was an intervention. So it is not, I can tell that there was nothing out for then. The member nominated member Shamala Jennifer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support this bill, save with a few amendments, more specifically, negotiable warehouse receipt, who is in possession of this receipt. I think that the bill must be more precise as to how one comes into possession of this receipt, and maybe that could be dealt with by regulations, but specified in the Act. With regards to clause 17.3, it states that the county executive committee member may grant or refuse to grant a license to an applicant and may issue a license subject to any such conditions as it may consider necessary. Again, this is of course with regards to the license to be a warehouse operator. It is open-ended, and it can become the subject of a lot of controversy because it gives almost dictatorial powers to a county committee when you say subject to conditions that they consider necessary, unless these conditions are subject to regulations. And just simply with regards to a style of typing in clause 18, where they talk about fires, floods, etc., perhaps the word force majeure would be more applicable. However, with those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I shall forward some more of my comments to the committee before we proceed to the committee stage. With those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I support with the suggested amendments.
Very well, very well. And I'm also sure the leader of majority, who's a mover of the bill, is still around. But thank you for those observations, if applicable, and if it is true that they will be required to be amended, or the committee, together with the leader of majority, will be welcome. The member for Rongai, or Moi Kipruto. I love the corner, you, yes. Is he on, are you, just use the other mic. You know the corner you, on your left. On your left, yes. There are many for you.
Yeah, let me use this one.
You use that.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on this bill. It's a very important bill. I support this bill. As we know, agriculture is the backbone of many economies in Africa. In Kenya, it accounts for about 30% of the GDP, and it employs close to 75% of the population, so it's a very important sector of the economy. But while agriculture remains a key economic sector, Madam Speaker, and a key link to food security, only about 5% of lending in this country from banks go to the agricultural sector. And yet it contributes close to 30% to the economy. So we think it is skewed in that regard, Madam Speaker. The WRS system, Madam Speaker, will give access to finance to the smallholder farmers because it will now have the ability to transform agriculture from a subsistence as it is right now and low value to one that is very innovative, commercially driven, and internationally competitive, Madam Speaker. However, smallholder farmers, Madam Speaker, we find that their practices in terms of agriculture is extremely fragmented and unpredictable. So the warehouse receipt system, through this bill, offers a very good solution to these smallholder farmers. Because after harvesting, the farmer or the trader can deposit their goods to the warehouse and get a title, a document of title called a warehouse receipt, which then the farmer can use to apply for a short-term credit facility, and then will be able to gain access to seed, to fertilizer, and this in turn will increase productivity in our smallholder farmers, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the WRS also reduces pressure on the farmers to sell immediately because most of these goods will be locked up in a warehouse. So the farmer will then have to wait, and the prices go up. Then they will be able to sell their produce, as opposed to the case now, they harvest and then they throw they flog their produce to any buyer, whatever the price is. So with the WRS, it will greatly change their lives. This WRS also allows sales to continue, Madam Speaker, from one harvest to another. So this, in effect, will stabilize prices. It also will reduce post-harvest losses, and because these warehouses are certified, they're equipped with appropriate facilities and expertise to ensure that the quality is right, and thus will certify also the quantities. We know, Madam Speaker, that the losses in certified WRS warehouses are very, very minimal. But if you were to go to non-certified warehouses, namely the government ones, namely those owned by the cereal board, you'll find that the losses at times can be 30%. So that is extremely high. Madam Speaker, for the WRS system to work, there needs to be a legal framework, and I think this bill provides that. Because as it is now, Madam Speaker, the rules that govern the current warehouse
for their goods, it will also help the farmers to remove the losses which are associated with storage, especially by pests. We know many farmers don't have the financial might to be able to keep the produce, especially the cereals, in good conditions. The system also will also remove the monopoly of the cereals board, which have been the main storage for special strategic food reserves for the country. We know many times where the farmers have to ask the government to come to their aid to be able to to buy most of their produce. But this particular system, we believe there will be a series of many licensed warehouses across the country. And this is where the farmers can bring their various cereals. It could be maize, it could be green grams, beans, and all these other types of cereals which can be accepted in those particular warehouses. And this will go a long way in which the farmers can be assisted for their goods to be kept in good conditions. Particularly, the farmers can also be protected from fluctuations of pricing of particular cereals, because we know when the particular time of harvesting comes along, the pricing of most of the cereals goes down, and that's when the farmers do not get value for their crops, especially given that they may have put a lot of inputs, may have costed a lot of money,
to find things like fertilizers and all other things so that to reach the market in good shape. Therefore, this particular system will come to the aid of the farmers in terms of protecting them from excessive fluctuations of prices due to probably maybe glut of the excessive production of the product. We also believe that this particular system has sound legal protection. We believe the system will be such that the system itself, the resist warehouse system, will be such that this particular legal instrument is properly protected so that can be used as an instrument of bargaining or for be traded even in a commodity exchange. So particularly, I'm impressed that this particular system will also be privately driven. So in other words, will be driven by private sector as opposed to the government, which are associated with a bit of low efficiencies. So therefore, this particular system, Madam Speaker, will go a long way in which will assist the farmers get value for their products. And therefore, I rise to say I beg to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, the member for Keio North, that is the final member on my request list, the Honorable Murgo Kipkosgei, and then the mover is called upon to reply.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to put my voice into this bill and also put in my views. Madam Speaker, this bill on the face value looks very good. Actually, when you look at it, you say this is the solution to our problems. But Madam Speaker, there's something which we should not forget. I know members who have contributed. I've said it has worked in many areas, India, Brazil, I don't know where, etc. But those are other countries. This is Kenya. And, Madam Speaker, this copy and paste because others are doing is not the right way. We know in Kenya here, one of the biggest problems we have is corruption. Corruption and corruption. And even at one time, the late President Nyerere said Kenya is man-eat-man society, and I think he was right to a certain extent. So, Madam Speaker, this warehousing and receipting, I would have been very convinced if they had started with piloting with what we have. We know cereals had a problem, but it's a government institution, which we could clean up. We could clean up and start piloting from cereals and see whether it is going to work. But I see we are jumping into this thing like what we did with our constitution and copied and pasted the constitution similar to America, and that is why we have challenges now. Madam Speaker, I wonder, let me put in there, because I'm a maize farmer, what assurance can I have when I take my maize to a warehouse, leave it there, get somebody to sell it for me? What assurance will I get value for my goods? Madam Speaker, a farmer would put his crop in a warehouse. And then these cartels import maize, like they did this year, into a warehouse they have established, and they have brought it cheaply. What is going to happen to that maize of the farmer? It will drop down. So, Madam Speaker, this thing, as I said before, it looks very good. There are other challenges which I think actually with regulation has come, insurance of these things against, of course, disasters, that one can be done. But as long as corruption As long as Kenyans are the man-eat-man society, I doubt whether this bill is going to be of any help. When I was looking at it, I sometimes wondered whether this bill was brought with cartels in mind. I don't know, Madam Speaker. But all in all, it's a fair bill if it was thought and piloted. And with those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I don't know whether to, I will support very well, with a lot of reservations. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You support, but your amendments are welcome. Honorable members, there be no other another request by the members to speak to this. I therefore do call upon the mover of the bill to reply. The Honorable Washeli.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I've sat through the entire debate on this bill, and Madam Speaker, maybe just for the information of members, is that Madam Speaker, in the 11th Parliament, I was a member of the Agricultural Committee together with Honorable Maanzo, and we actually, as a committee, we went through thoroughly through this bill. Madam Speaker, if members remember very well, this is a bill that was passed. Actually, this House has actually made its opinion on this bill. But when it went to the Senate, it had a problem. But it's good that now the Senate has thought through it and given us the bill now. I think it's important for this House to look at what they had approved earlier and make a decision. Madam Speaker, as I reply, I want to say that members' election, giving them an opportunity to store as they speculate on prices. We heard from our member from Kitui, who spoke on the pampa harvest they had on green grams, and again the pigeon peas. And Madam Speaker, this would actually help farmers. I heard of what our colleague who talked something slightly different, something that I had not looked at, about the storage of apples in South Africa that takes like 8 months. And he was actually proposing that if the same would be replicated to our English potatoes here, so that we can store our English potatoes for a longer period to be able to speculate on prices. I think, Madam Speaker, all said and done, we have heard what Honorable Eseli has said. We have heard what our member, the one who spoke last, said. We appreciate that they come from maize growing zones. But I think it is time that they need to consult with the Committee of Agriculture so that we can be reading from the same page. Otherwise, Madam Speaker, I have had issues of corruption, and sometimes you wonder, because the people who are talking about corruption, some of them do not qualify to talk about corruption. And it's an issue that we can discuss at length, because you cannot be talking about corruption when you yourself was corrupted the other day. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I just want us to be honest with what we are saying. Madam Speaker, I wish to reply.
Honorable Washiali, you cannot, I think we are free to speak, but do you have approval of that person? I don't even know you're talking about.
Of course, Madam Speaker, I want to withdraw, but of course, whoever is the culprit has had. Madam Speaker, I therefore wish to reply. Madam Speaker, I wish to reply and also request under Standing Order number 53.3, Madam Speaker, to request you to postpone putting the question until a later period. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. He said, yes, he said, and requested the putting of the question under 53 to the deferred order. Members, pass one to the same standing order, number 53, and guided by the rules and regulations and procedures of the House, I do order that putting of the question to the warehouse receipt system bill, Senate Bill number 10 of 2017, be done in the next sitting as it will be slotted in our order paper. Next order.
Motion. Order number 10, motion. Report on the Public Finance Management, Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund, Regulations 2018.
The chairperson, Committee on Delegated Legislation, to move the report.
Honorable Speaker.
Yeah, give her them. Yes, there you are.
Yes. Thank you. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that this House adopts the report of the Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the Public Finance Management, Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund Regulations 2018, legal notice number 174 of 2018, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, October 17th, 2018, and pursuant to the provisions of Section 15(1) of the Statutory Instruments Act 2013 and Standing Order 210-4B, annuls in its entirety the said regulations. Honorable Speaker, this is the 11th report of the committee before the House for consideration out of the 63 that have since been approved. From the onset, I wish to acknowledge with thanks the words of the Speaker commending the committee on several occasions for its diligence to duty. And indeed, even the Leader of Majority in his statement to the House on 4th October 2018 acknowledged that the House Business Committee noted with appreciation that the Committee on Delegated Legislation is amongst the committees that have concluded and tabled the highest number of reports in the current session. Having said that, Honorable Speaker, allow me to reiterate the mandate of the Select Committee on Delegated Legislation. Honorable Speaker, the Select Committee on Delegated Legislation is established pursuant to the Standing Orders number 210-4B and has the power to scrutinize and certify that all regulations submitted to the National Assembly are in compliance with the Constitution and all other acts of Parliament. Honorable Speaker, on the regulation before us, the Public Finance Management Act 2012, Section 2(4) allows the Cabinet Secretary of the National Treasury to establish a national government public fund with the approval of the National Assembly. In exercise of these powers, the Cabinet Secretary of the National Treasury gazetted the current regulations, the Public Finance Management, Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund, Regulations 2018, through legal notice number 174 of 2018 on the 10th of August 2018. Following the gazettement, Honorable Speaker, these regulations were tabled to the House on the 15th of August 2018 in compliance with the Statutory Instruments Act 2013, Section 11(1). The House then committed these regulations to the Select Committee of Delegated Legislation for review and scrutiny and to ensure compliance with the Constitution and the law. Honorable Speaker, I will just highlight two important parts of these regulations that are in question. Regulation 3 provides for the establishment of Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund for providing funding to support the development and promotion of sports, arts and social development, including universal health care. Regulation 6 also provides for an initial capital of 20 million shillings to be provided by the National Assembly in the 2018-2019 financial year. Honorable Speaker, the last regulation I'll refer to is Regulation 4, which provides for the various sources of the fund, being inter alia proceeds required to be paid into the fund under the Betting, Lotteries and Gaming Act. Proceeds which are required to be paid into this fund also under the Income Tax Act as appropriated by the National Assembly, and including other grants and donations and income generated from those particular proceeds. Honorable Speaker, the committee then considered these regulations at its sitting on Thursday, 11th October, against the provisions of the Constitution, the Public Finance Management Act, the Statutory Instruments Act, the Interpretation and General Provisions Act, to ensure that they met the scrutiny criteria. Honorable Speaker, the committee found that the regulation complied with the statutory timeline as per the Statutory Instruments Act, and the committee, because it came within 7 days and was published within the statutory period as required. And therefore, the committee had no adverse finding in terms of time compliance. However, the committee found that the regulation was inconsistent with an existing parent act, that is the Sports Act 2013. And clearly, the Statutory Instruments Act indicates or states and provides that no regulation can contravene a parent statute. In this case, the Sports Act of 2013. Honorable Speaker, in that particular parent statute, that's the Sports Act, it does establish another fund. And therefore, the committee found that there would be a duplication should that happen. However, we do understand the challenge that was faced by the September 2018, yet the regulations were before the committee and had already been gazetted by the 14th of August 2018. And therefore, one came before the other, therefore making them inconsistent with both laws. Honorable Speaker, as I've said before on the floor of this House, annulment of these proposed regulations does not prevent the resubmission of the same once the shortcomings have been rectified. And therefore, it was the view of the committee that this annulment is an opportunity to republish these regulations, but ensure that they cure the mischief and properly invoke the authority granted under the Finance Act, so that these monies can be rightly be within this particular fund that would have been created. And therefore, as our committee has many times confirmed, is that the annulment is a safer way of dealing with the problem or the inconsistency with the law and the contravention of the parent statute. So that because the Finance Act is now properly a law, then the Cabinet Secretary has the opportunity to then publish the regulations again, but now anchor them in the Finance Act. And if I may just say this for the record, the Finance Act 2018 in section 69A states that the collector shall pay all the proceeds of the tax paid under sections 29A2 and 44A2, 55A2 and 59B2 into the Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund established under section 24 of the Public Finance Management Act. Unfortunately, when the regulations came before us, this section was not in effect yet. Now that's in effect, they do have the opportunity. And therefore, because of the reasons that I have given, the committee having considered all these regulations and the reasons that I have given, it is the recommendation of the committee that the Public Finance Management, Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund Regulations 2018 be annulled in its entirety for those reasons. And with that, Honorable Speaker, I call upon a member of the committee, Honorable Jennifer Shamala, to second this report. Madam Speaker.
Jennifer, for your seconding. Honorable.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to second this report. Madam Speaker, on going through these regulations and noting that the fund intended to support the promotion of sports, arts, and social development, it was striking to actually observe that there are no existing regulations, more specifically on arts and culture, and that the only two existing legislations surrounding arts and social development are one, the Macmillan Memorial Library, which commenced in 1938, almost 80 years ago, and addresses the management of a trust deed set up by Lady Macmillan. And then you have the Kenya Culture Center, whose date of commencement was 1951. And it incorporates the Nairobi War Memorial, which commemorates 477 men who died from the UK, South Africa, the East African forces, and whose graves could not be identified. It is situated within the Nairobi War Cemetery along Gong Road, and is really a grand tribute to the heroes of time gone by. Needless to say, both these legislations are pre-independence legislation. We must ask ourselves, what laws do we have that are going to contribute to social development and to then continue? They contributed indeed, these two particular legislations, to the social development through reading and through history and the knowledge of history. While the intended purpose of the proposed fund was positive, and again I want to stress, had they been public participation, I'm absolutely certain there would have been a robust discussion around what contributes to social development. One cannot deny the immense contribution of sports, and of course we always have sports coming before the other important aspects such as social development and culture. And especially we recognize the immense contribution of sports, specifically in athletics and in social development. And it is evident every morning when you go through the Source of Champions, House of Champions, Neighbors of Champions, Kapsabet, Iten, and Kericho, as they refer to themselves. And you see young people getting up, exercising, running, wanting to emulate the Eliud Kipchoges of the world. However, we must ask ourselves, what else is there towards our social development besides athletics? We are known as Magical Kenya. But what is this Magical Kenya? Is it just about the animals? And is it just of Kenya? And it is this social development that begins to identify who the people of Kenya are. We talk about national characters of countries like Great Britain, of the United States, or even Pakistan or India. But what is the national character of this nation? What are its values? What are its beliefs? What are its aspirations? It is through this fund, once if set up properly, and will promote social development, that we will have a more vigorous social development program in place, and that will be, we as Kenyans will be able to better define our national character as a nation and then move collectively. With those few remarks, Madam Speaker, in my considered opinion, I think that it is important that these regulations be brought back in consultations with the delegated committee. And with those few remarks, I second the report.
You second the report very well. Other members? Honourable members, I propose the question, which is that the House adopts the report of the Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the Public Finance Management, Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund, Regulations 2018, Legal Notice number 174 of 2018, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, October 17, 2018, and pursuant to the provisions of Section 15(1) of the Statutory Instruments Act 2013 and Standing Order 210(4)B, annuls in entirety the said regulations. Member for Makueni.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute on this very important motion. Madam Speaker, I want to agree with the chair, my professor, the Honorable Sholei, on the annulment, and also the Honorable Shamala, who is a senior lawyer, for seconding. And I want to say that on top of the reasons which have been advanced, we must go back to the history. Social development is important. And we also would like to encourage Treasury to be consistent. And I would really like to meet their lawyer, because I think a lot of times Treasury is being misadvised on a lot of pieces of legislation. This is not an isolated case. And what has happened in this particular matter, they put the horse before the cart. First, they go and make the propose to set up this fund, ignoring the original Sports Act, which I'm very proud to say that when I worked for the Ministry of Sports, I participated, and you know the many challenges which have been with the fundraising of sports in the country, and at that particular time, betting and control was to raise money specifically to develop sporting activities in the country. But now, it has now involved other social, come up with regulations which are specific. What is the percentage going to housing? What else is going to other arts, so that it is specific from the beginning and can be able to serve the original purpose, which is already in the Sports Act 2013, which we worked on for quite some years and did a lot of consultations to come on with this particular law. And therefore, it will be prudent that the Treasury consults further before coming back with this legislation. That's why the annulment is in good faith and in good order, so that now they can go put their house in order and come back to Parliament using the proper path. And I believe Parliament will be able to approve and will be able to continue financing the activities. Already in our budget this year, Madam Speaker, we have set aside 20 million shillings for this particular activity, even without a law. And that tells you the aggressiveness in which some people in the country or people concerned with fundraising for sporting activities and now social services, of which now from Honorable Shamala you have heard. There are other acts of parliament which, although obsolete by the virtue of independence and the new constitution, are still operational and they are still not being used. So we need to make further amendments and synchronize all the activities in this particular respect, Madam Speaker, so that we can be able to make sure that we make a law, we form a fund which serves this country, which serves the young athletes in this country. I've been in that industry. It has a lot of challenges, and now you hear good people have been charged because of management of these particular activities, and we want to make sure that there's no corruption. There are no opportunities even to misuse the monies. Sporting activities are very expensive, especially the Olympics, which we shine very well as a country. There is an Olympic camp where the sports people stay when they go to Olympics in whatever country. And that is very expensive because they're hired for that particular period, which takes almost a month. And the expenses are humongous. So if they are very huge. So if we have a particular law, we have a specific fund, because there are many other funds in the country. We have no duplication. We follow the constitution. We follow the laws which exist. We amend the laws accordingly. And then I believe we are going to serve the sportsmen of this country who have suffered for a long time. We also want to make sure from the taxes now, which we passed recently on the 8% that have been signed into law, that these monies are specific, because the Betting Act also appeared in those amendments, the miscellaneous amendments. And we have made sure that there are taxes. So these taxes, when they go to Treasury, it should be specific by law that these taxes proceed, and the money is collected proceed to serve a specific purpose. And if you see the composition of the board as proposed previously and now, what exists in the law, what is there now, Treasury is represented in that particular board. And therefore, Treasury does not miss a single detail of what is happening with that fund. So we want to make sure that there is no mischief. As a committee, we are very firm and we are very serious with what we do. We're very specific. We look at the law very keenly and make sure that the law is followed by our institutions, which propose these laws to the floor of the House and to the committee so that Kenyans can be served better. I thank you, Madam Speaker. I support.
Thank you, Honorable Manso. Let's get the member, the chairman of the Sports Committee, the Honorable Member for Machakos. Munyaka Kioko.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want from the onset to congratulate the chair and committee on delegated legislation for their work, which is actually going to correct a lot of anomaly in this particular regulation. As the chair of Sports, Culture and Tourism, I think it is very unfortunate that the funds, which are very, very important to the functioning of sports and arts in Kenya, have actually is going to be affected by some delays because of poor regulations. But you know, legally, this house has to be able to accommodate what is legal, and that's why I congratulate the committee for really forcing the executive to be able to bring before the House the correct and the legal regulations. Madam Speaker, this fund is actually meant to solve the historical underfunding in especially the sports department, because you know, the betting taxes, they run into billions, and currently in Kenya we lack sports facilities and even sponsorship of sports activities. And you can even imagine, as Kenya is still going on and doing very well on sports, especially athletics and rugby, and even of late, the national football team, which is Harambee Stars, which is almost qualifying for next year's AFCON 2019. You can imagine these sportsmen and women are really excelling so much when Kenya has very few sports modern facilities. So this fund is really going to help the youth of our country, so that if we could be able to create the sports academies across the country, we would be able to nurture talents across the country. And this fund is really going to assist our youth and our sports people, and will be able to make Kenya shine across the world in the field of sports. Madam Speaker, last Sunday, but one, when Harambee Stars was actually playing against Ethiopia, I saw the passion of Kenyans, because the Kasarani Stadium was full to capacity, and an equal number. We don't have such nullifications before the House. Madam Speaker, since this fund is very important to the running of our sports, and you know we are still behind in most of the sports activities, I request, and I'm very happy about the chair, because I think we consulted with her this morning, even with the peers, so that this new, the proposal, the one they want to bring, should be fast-tracked within 7 days, so that this amount can be unlocked, so that our youth do not suffer anymore. Otherwise, I support, and thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, very well. Now, when you talk about public finance and issues of development, and the next member is a chair, Public Accounts Committee, who examines on the expenditures.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, from the outset.
The Honorable Wandai Opio.
Yes, Madam Speaker. Yeah. From the outset, I want to say that I'm very proud of the work that the committee has done. You know, this Committee on Delegated Legislation has for long been mistaken. It has been made to appear as if it is simply a conveyor belt for regulations emanating from the executive. And therefore, this bold move by this committee, chaired ably by Mheshimiwa Sholei, is laudable. It's laudable in the sense that, Madam Speaker, sports, arts and social development issues are very important issues. Indeed, Madam Speaker, if you talk about sports specifically, you will agree with me that sports has got the potential to not only empower our people economically, but it's also a vehicle through which the country can market itself globally. But for a long time, we have had challenges, serious challenges, in terms of funding sports and related activities. And therefore, it is important that regulations meant to guide the funding of sports need to be enacted, need to be crafted in a transparent, in a consultative manner with the involvement of key players and key stakeholders. Short of that, Madam Speaker, the committee has done the right thing. Madam Speaker, for a long time, Kenya has been known for matters sports. And indeed, again, for a long time, the sports sector has been neglected. Totally. In fact, the other day, I was impressed to listen to the President, President Uhuru Kenyatta, lamenting about people craving for results, pushing their children to get good results in school. And yet, every person is endowed differently, talent-wise. Madam Speaker, this country has shown that men and women can excel in sports and succeed in life, Madam Speaker. And therefore, it is important that the country puts in more emphasis in terms of addressing the sports sector and support those who participate in sporting activities as a way of encouraging or enhancing or nurturing even newer talent, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's also unfortunate that when you talk about sports in this country, what comes to mind is corruption. It's corruption, Madam Speaker. And this for purpose. Madam Speaker, it has been proven that a lot of people actually get involved in sports in terms of management and otherwise, with a specific agenda and intention to reap unfairly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I think in the fullness of time, this House needs to guide the country in terms of putting in place mechanisms and systems to ensure that sporting activities or sports in general is not misused by a few people, few connected people, okay, who misuse it for their own benefit at the expense of the country, Madam Speaker. So the sports still has a lot of potential, a lot of potential that if tapped can take the country forward. So what is the way forward, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, I want to suggest that the relevant Cabinet Secretary and the State Department takes it upon himself to ensure that this process is reopened, is restarted. The process of putting in place these regulations is restarted, and indeed it's opened up to people who are stakeholders to give their views, and so that we, at the end of the day, we come up with regulations that are watertight, that will help enhance the sports sector. I also want to encourage and in fact thank my colleague and friend, Honorable Dr. Victor Munyaka. Okay, he has really made a lot of progress in terms of guiding his committee in addressing issues sports. In fact, it was very important that this House creates a committee specifically responsible for matters sports. And the Honorable Victor Munyaka has been equal to the task. Yeah, and we need to encourage him to continue in that spirit, so that we don't move forward as a country while ignoring very, very critical sectors which can help the country turn around. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member for Lukuyani.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, may I also start by thanking and congratulating the committee for delegated registration for having read what to me appears to be something that was deliberately being done by the Ministry of Finance. Because, Madam Speaker, as you well know, and it is common knowledge, there has been this push and pull between the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Youth and Sports as far as this money that is coming from betting and gaming is concerned, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would just like to say two things. One, that for us to be able to realize the full potential of our youth, we must start tapping their talents when they are still very young. And for that, Madam Speaker, I mean the idea that came up for us to have youth academies in every constituency, that's an idea that we all must embrace. Because, Madam Speaker, as we know, most of you might not know, but the great football player called Lionel Messi in the world, he was tapped when he was still very young in the Barcelona Youth Academy. And at that time, Madam Speaker, he was not growing very well. So the doctors realized what the problem was, and they started giving him some injections of growth hormone when he was in the Youth Academy. And we can see what a great player he is in the world now. All our youth want to emulate him, Madam Speaker. Finally, I just want to say that as I talk about fairness, equity in the country, we must be able to borrow from what has been successful. In Kenya right now, the government came up with the idea of starting up TVETs in every constituency, and this is an idea that is going on very well. That is an example of equity and fairness. I know the whole concept of CDF is an example of equity and fairness, Madam Speaker. So if we go the way of starting youth academies in this country, it is also in the same way as equity and fairness, Madam Speaker. Because I know there's movement for us to finish this motion today, let me stop there and again congratulate the committee for the work that they have done. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The leader of majority, member for Garissa Township.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I had to rush from my office, at least to make sure that I make certain information very, very clear that this regulation which is being annulled on the PFM, on the Public Finance Management, Sports, Arts and Social Development regulations. Madam Speaker, this is where the bulk of the money, 45%, will go to the universal health care. And as I listened to the chair of sports committee in the House, I want to bring to the attention of the House that in the finance bill that was passed, you know, that controversial finance bill, people were only busy looking at the fuel levy. But there was an amendment that was making sure and putting this fund under the national treasury. But because the proceeds for this fund, they are coming from a number of areas, from the lotteries and gaming. They are coming from, some part of it will come from the income tax, monies appropriated by the National Assembly. There will be grants, there will be donations. And I am sure, having consulted the chair of delegated legislation, we will bring back to the House a more better regulation that conforms to the Constitution and to the intended purpose. So, Honorable Chair of Sports, there's a lot of controversy out in the Ministry of Sports that because of the amount of money that will be allocated to this fund, and because this fund primarily will deal with 3 aspects of sports, arts, and social development, and the social development aspect of it will be mainly the universal health care for all for the next 5 years, then please pass a message to the Ministry of Sports that this fund, based on the amendment that was passed in the Finance Act, because now it's an act, it will be managed, regulated by the National Treasury. With those many remarks, Madam Speaker, I wish also to encourage the regulatory making authorities to, as much as it is practicable possible, consult with the Parliament and with this committee and the leadership before the publication of any regulation. Why do I say so? This dialogue will, as far as possible, assist the authorities and impact awareness so that we don't use the floor of the House or its committees to annul regulations. But if we consult before these regulations are published, then we will have a more better consensus between Parliament and those authorities or bodies or institutions that own these regulations. I beg to support.
Thank you, the Leader of Majority. I call upon the mover to reply. There have no been another request.
Honorable Speaker, I wish to thank all the members here who have very robustly contributed to this particular motion. I do appreciate it. And I also want to appreciate members of my committee who have worked very hard on this. And I must say that this sports fund became very emotive because I think each of us know many young people who can benefit from this kind of fund. I personally recently held the first ever art exhibition in Uasin Gishu County, and I don't think there's been any held in the country ever. And it's because I believe in sports and arts, even as a person, besides being chair of delegated legislation. This is something that needs to be dealt with urgently. I'll be urging the National Treasury to ensure that they rectify the errors and immediately bring it back to the House so that we don't have any of our sports people and people involved in art suffering for lack of funds, yet there is a mechanism through the Finance Act for them to have resources. I think this is the first time ever in 25 years that we have this kind of fund. The challenge was just that. I'd urge the ministries to consult with the committee in advance, and most importantly, make sure they undertake some cross-referencing. And as I close, as I beg to move this motion, I also want to donate 2 minutes of my time to, as I reply, I would like to donate
Honorable,
1 minute.
Okay, Honorable Gladys Shirley, just 1 moment for a point of order. Let me hear what is out of order by the Leader of Majority. Just resume your seat as it.
Madam Speaker, I really want the chair
Honorable
to...
Shirley, I cannot have 2 members.
Yes, I wanted to cite the provisions in the standing order where donation is provided for. I have never, after you have moved, you cannot donate. After, you are applying, you cannot. So it's not, Honorable Chole is not in Uasin Gishu County where she donates cows, goats.
Yes. Yes, it's usually provided for when. Let me just roll on this. It's usually provided for the leader of majority at the point when the debate is maturely, completed in terms of debate. Of course, if someone has not risen on 95, this was virtually completed by the debate. But now the Honorable Cholet did not give or donate, or she was not philanthropic at the start of the moving of the replying. So I think, but however, you had a very good intention to donate 2 minutes. So you already moved, and you already replied. Of course, that's what I.
Honorable Speaker, I stand corrected and guided accordingly. Unfortunately, I caught the eye of Honorable Serone after I began speaking, hence the error. But with those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I beg to reply.
You had already replied, of course. You beg to reply again, which is fine. Honourable members, allow me to appreciate all of you for the good work, of course, and given and also guided by the rules, the standing order of the House. I am not in a position to put the question to the report on the Public Finance Management, Sports and Social Development Fund Regulation 2018. And so the putting of the question will be done as it will be slotted in the order paper. The next sitting. Order members. Order members, order members. The time being 6:59 p.m. This House stands adjourned till the Wednesday, 24th October 2018 at 9:30 a.m. I thank you all.